My name is Darren Crouch. I'm the president and CEO of Passages, which is where you're sitting today. I started this company with my brother-in-law, who's a funeral director. I married into the business. My wife is the daughter of the local funeral director in northern New Mexico, and we started this business in the back of a funeral home. And before I start, I just want to thank Gail for everything she does and bringing awareness and encouraging people to plan and think about these things, because unfortunately, I don't know if you said this, but last time we checked, there is 100% mortality rate for all of us, so there's no escaping it, right? So the quicker we start thinking about it and planning it, the better. I also want to thank my team, Killian, Melissa, Laura. There's several other people that have made this possible, so I want to thank them. Yeah, we specialize in green and biodegradable products. For those of you that know, I mean, pretty much anything about the wider economy, people are going green in every part of their life, right? Whether it's driving electric vehicles, flex fuel vehicles, whether it's putting solar on their roofs, whatever it is, recycling. And so there's an increased consciousness of renewability, sustainability, climate change, global warming, whatever you want to call it. And that does transfer to the funeral industry. Unfortunately, you know, as Gail all too well knows, people don't think about it or talk about it until it inevitably happens. And at that time, oftentimes, people are not thinking as clearly as they might otherwise think, and end up with a funeral that doesn't really reflect the life that they lived. And so I think planning is really important, so that if you lived a certain way, your funeral can reflect the way you lived. And so, you know, at Passages, what we do is we create products that enable people to have a more sustainable, often more meaningful exit. And, you know, every product is going to have a carbon footprint. Every funeral is going to have a carbon footprint. And our goal at Passages is to minimize that and reduce that. I'll give you some examples of that. So, you know, a lot of our products are imported. We know there's a carbon footprint importing product, and so what we do is we nest a lot of products. So with our caskets, for example, you know, we might have a 5'9" casket nested inside a 6'5" casket, like Russian doll style, and then have, you know, shrouds and urns and other products in there. So we're trying to reduce the carbon footprint. Other products that we bring in flat packed and we assemble here. So those two caskets on the bottom, they actually come flat packed, and the box is about this big, and we build them here. So we're very conscious of that. I think the other thing that's really important that we are conscious of at Passages, especially for overseas production, is the social impact. And so a lot of our products are certified fair trade, and fair trade has 10 basic principles around it. One of them is regarding sustainability and the environment, but the other 9 are really about social conscience. So making sure that we, you know, don't employ people that are children or underage, making sure we have safe working conditions, making sure we're not working people 16 hours a day. You know, at some of the places that we do business, people have hardly gone to school, they can't read and write, they can't tell the time, and so we bring skills to people that they may not otherwise learn. And we provide capacity. So for example, a lot of our fair trade products are made in northern Bangladesh, which is a very impoverished area, and it's an economic zone that we work in. And we have an impact manager at the factory that helps people with issues that a typical HR department or person would not help an employee with. Things like predatory lending or domestic abuse. We are helping people with those types of things. And so I think when it comes from a consumer's perspective, buying these products, you know, there's a bigger story behind the fact that it's just renewable, sustainable, biodegradable, but it also has a social impact. So as people purchase these types of products, they can be confident that there's a benefit beyond just the sustainability and the renewability part of it. We have a lot of different products. So when I got in the business, about 75% of people were buried, and most of those people were buried the same way. So it was an embalmed body in a metal or a wood casket, with a service at a church, and then a burial in a concrete or metal liner at the cemetery. It's pretty cookie cutter. You know, the difference was what kind of casket you're going to have, where you're going to be buried, who's going to officiate, but it was pretty cookie cutter. Today, depending where you go in the country, probably 7 out of 10 people are cremated. So there's been this huge shift in the industry away from burial towards cremation. And I think in part, people chose cremation because it was basically a rejection of traditional burial. They didn't want either to be embalmed, they didn't want to spend $7,000 or $8,000. They didn't want all the pomp and ceremony. They weren't going to be buried where the rest of their family was or where they lived. And so people selected cremation because it gives you a lot more flexibility. It's also much less expensive, and it allows you to delay the decision. So, you know, when somebody dies, if you're going to bury, that needs to happen relatively quickly. Whereas with cremation, somebody dies, gets cremated, you know, you can make decisions 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 5 years from now, how you want to celebrate and honor that person. So it gives you a lot of time to reflect. You know, today there are other options around sustainability. You know, there's natural organic reduction, which is essentially human composting that's available. There's alkali hydrolysis that's available, which is kind of marketed as water-based cremation or flameless cremation. So there's a lot of choices for consumers. It's, you know, I kind of equate it to, you know, going and buying a Toyota. You go to the Toyota dealership and you can get a Tundra pickup truck, you can get a Sienna minivan, you can get a Camry sedan, you can get a Prius hybrid. You know, you have choices. You can probably get a sports car there as well. So it really depends, and I think the future of the funeral is going to be, yeah, we have traditional burial with embalming and metal casket, but we also have natural burial in a wicker casket or a bamboo casket without embalming, in a hand-dug grave, or we have flameless or flame cremation. So there's been a lot of change in the industry, and at Passages what we want to do is provide those sustainable options for people to allow them to have a more meaningful, and when you talk to funeral directors, and if any of you have ever been to a natural funeral, what I hear from funeral directors and families that have been is it's very powerful. You know, green burial is really powerful. A lot of times there's more participation. You know, historically in traditional funerals, the funeral director did nearly everything. So somebody died at the hospital or at home, the body got picked up, whisked away, was refrigerated or embalmed. The next time you saw the body 3 or 4 days later, it was in a casket, close the casket, burial, kind of like problem solved, you know. Whereas with natural burial, a lot of times, you know, someone may spend 6 or 8 hours with the deceased person at home because that's their last time they can spend with them. They may help dress, cosmetize, wash, dig the grave, build the casket. It's a lot more participation. And a lot of times the participation, A, helps with the grieving because you actually get to realize that this person is gone and deceased, versus, you know, embalming it. They almost look like they're alive, right? The goal is to make them look like they're alive.
Or just sleeping.
Or just sleeping, yeah. But I think that the natural burial has been really impactful for a lot of people because it allows them to start the grieving process. Also, the participation really helps you honor that person. When you're involved in either spending time with the body after someone passes away, or washing the body, or shrouding the body, or doing those types of things, it's also a way to honor and celebrate that person in a very different kind of way than just going to a funeral service and being a spectator. You know, when a lot of natural burials are more participatory, so you can actually participate in it versus just watching it. And so there's a lot more. I hear things like, you know, raw emotion, which is raw, I think, in a good way, not a bad way. It's people expressing their emotions. So we also have a lot of products for scattering. You know, if we said, you know, 6 or 7 out of 10 people intend to scatter today, data shows that about half of those people intend to scatter cremated remains. And so a lot of the products that you see behind me are designed for scattering. We have products that you can pour the cremated remains or ashes out of, sort of the traditional, sort of, you know, Big Lebowski type way, you know, just spread them into the wind. But we also have a lot of products that are designed, for example, to go into the water. So a lot of people want to place cremated remains in the ocean or on a lake or from a cruise. And so a lot of these products allow you to place the whole product into the water. They'll float briefly while people sing a song, say a prayer, scatter flower petals, those types of things, and then sink and biodegrade. And they're made of different materials. We have handmade paper, Himalayan rock salt, recycled paper, those types of things. And so we also have a new initiative that we've just launched this year where, if you think about a cemetery as a community of people where you can go to the cemetery, either go to the cemetery office or go directly and wander around and find a grave and see the person's name on the grave and actually know who's there and spend time with that person at the grave, there really hasn't been anything equivalent to that with scattering. A lot of times people go out and scatter, and then the only people that know where that person was scattered are the people that actually did it. And so what we've created is a program called Etern.life. It's a web-based program where families are able to actually geolocate exactly where they scattered cremated remains and upload photos and a brief memorial about the person. So you can go to Etern.life and you can see, it's basically a community of people that have scattered, and you can see what interesting things people have done to honor and celebrate their loved ones through scattering. Many of them will actually put photos of the product as well as the day of the event, what they did, as well as the person that they're scattering.
Another key point about that is somebody could find the exact spot later on, because so often you scatter and you're not quite sure exactly where that place was.
Right. So they can go to the map and the longitude and the latitude, and there'll actually be a pin on the map so they can go back to that place. They can also share it on social media with friends and family. So we've basically created sort of a digital registry of people that have scattered, a community of people that have scattered. And the idea is that people can learn about interesting things that people have done to remember and celebrate a loved one.
Talk about the turtles.
Oh, okay, cool. So yeah, we have these little guys here that have been super popular. This is made of craft paper. We actually work with a company in Mexico that makes these. The cremated remains get loaded into the bottom in a biodegradable bag, and you glue this down, and then you can put it in the water. It'll float for a few minutes, take on water, and it'll sink and biodegrade naturally over time. We have two different kinds of biodegradable urn. One that I would describe as sort of dissolving. Like if you put a sugar cube in your coffee, within a minute or two, it's completely gone. So a lot of these products up here are more dissolving, and the red ones, the salt urns, are. So these ones here are more dissolving products, and then you have the salt urns, which I would also describe as dissolving, meaning once you put them in the water, within 3 or 4 hours, they'll be completely gone. Something like the turtle is made of paper. It won't dissolve. It'll biodegrade like a leaf or any other organic material will biodegrade. But within several days or weeks, it'll be completely gone. And within several hours, you won't be able to recognize it as what you put in the water, nor will you be able to remove it from the water. But it's not dissolvable, it's biodegradable. And then we also have the mini sizes if somebody wanted to split. The beauty of cremation, for example, is you can do different things at different times. So if you vacationed in Maui every year and you wanted to scatter a small portion of the remains in Maui, but you also had a home, on a lake in Illinois, for example, and you wanted to scatter a small amount there. People are doing things where that are sentimentally significant to them, and cremation allows you to do that by splitting cremated remains. The other thing splitting cremated remains allows people to do is, instead of grandma scattering grandpa, it could be grandma, the kids, the grandkids can all participate and celebrate that way.
Didn't you have a story about a real turtle?
I did, yes. So we've had 2 people tell us, one in Australia, one in South Carolina, I think, that when they put this in the water, a real turtle swam up during the committal service. And so, that's a really good point, that, the products themselves don't have a lot of value. So this is paper, right? It's not bronze or solid gold, it's a paper or marble. The value of the product really is in the experience it enables you to have to celebrate your loved one. And so, sometimes people ask, well, why is this the price that it is? And the reason is because of the experience that enables you to have, right? So,
You are also president of the Green Burial Council. You want to talk a little bit about that?
sure. So yeah, I'm the president of the Green Burial Council. The Green Burial Council actually was actually founded in New Mexico in 2005 by Joe Seehey. He now lives in Australia. But the Green Burial Council advocates for greener and more sustainable funeral options. It's a nonprofit. We have two sides of the nonprofit, a 501c3 and a 501c6. And on the one side, we're educating consumers about greener options, and on the other side, we are certifying professionals. So we certify cemeteries, and there are three kinds of certified green burial cemeteries. There's a conservation burial ground, which is sort of, as the name implies, it's more than just green burial. It's about conserving the land and the environment around it. We have a hybrid cemetery designation, which is more about natural burial in a traditional cemetery. And then we have a natural burial certification. So the natural certification is very similar to the conservation burial, but there's no conservation requirements per se. But you can't have embalmed bodies or metal caskets or concrete vaults in a natural cemetery, but you could have it in a hybrid cemetery. And the reason for that is there's just not very many conservation cemeteries or natural burial grounds around. But there's obviously lots of cemeteries that have been around for decades or hundreds of years. Many of those cemeteries have space. And so, for example, we have someone on our board. They run a very big old cemetery in Portland, Oregon, where many of the founding fathers and mothers of Portland are buried. And they will do natural burial anywhere in that cemetery. And about 30% of their burials are natural burials. We also certify funeral homes, so that's independent certification where we verify that funeral homes are meeting certain standards. They need to be offering at least a couple of biodegradable, eco-friendly caskets and shrouds. They need to not require embalming. Embalming is not required by law anywhere in this country, and so they need to be clear to consumers that that is the case. There are some other standards that they need to meet to gain certification. They also certify products. So the vast majority of our products are Green Burial Council certified, and we have to provide information on, how the raw materials are harvested, how they're transported, whether the product has, what kind of linings is it? Is it natural cotton lining? Is it polyester? What are the finishes on the product? Is it varnishes and stains, or is it natural? And so, the Green Burial Council is out there advocating for greener options when it comes to funerals.
Are there any of those cemeteries in New Mexico?
We do have one green cemetery here. It's called La Puerta, and I think they'll be speaking.
They are speaking this afternoon.
Later today. So yes, we do have one in Belen or Los Lunas, I think.
It's
Belen.
Belen. Or Belen.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Any other questions?
I have a question. I haven't been to church in a while, Catholic. Is it against, remember you couldn't do it as a Catholic, can you do it now? Does anybody know? You can.
You're talking about green burial or cremation? Or?
Yeah, cremation, I mean.
Scattering, I think.
So you can as a Catholic.
Yeah, that
You-
changed. My husband died in '01, and he was Catholic, and at that time, he had to be buried.
Right.
And then somewhere after that, it changed where they were
So we can,
allowed
so
to
you
be.
can't.
The new pope. The new pope changed it.
Oh,
Actually, the Vatican said cremation was okay back in 1963,
Oh,
but not a lot of people picked up on that then.
his family was one that did not.
Right. And actually, a lot of archdioceses are actually creating green burial sections and offering green as well. Yeah, we have quite a few. I don't know about Albuquerque. I know there's several. I know we also have a warehouse in New Jersey. There's one of the Catholic cemeteries over there has a green section, and so I think it's coming, for sure.
Do you have to go through a funeral home?
You don't have to go through a funeral home. I don't believe. There's home funeral practitioners, death doulas. I'm not 100% sure of the law here in New Mexico, how and where a funeral director needs to be involved, but it's not always the case. Funeral directors can help you through the process or help your family through the process. And I think, with what Gail's doing is if you are very clear about your wishes, you're much more likely to, get the type of service or send off that you want or you would like for your family to have.
And actually, the panel this afternoon will talk about home funerals and Native American burial, as well as the green burial folks.
Right.
Other questions?
Do most of the funeral homes here in Albuquerque honor green burials?
I think French's will. I mean, to be honest with you, I think if you ask, they will do it.
Because I did ask one time when I was out at Fairview, the woman that was representing French's, and he said they didn't, but that was a couple of years ago. Or maybe she didn't know.
Well, Jewish burial is naturally green burial. There's no embalming. The body is dressed in cotton or linen clothing, and the casket is biodegradable.
So they do that. So.
Yeah, either a plain pine box, or you can do a wicker basket casket like these over there,
Okay.
and those
They'll do
count.
that. Okay.
So yeah, it's the closest you can get to a green burial in a conventional cemetery.
You just have to convert just before you die.
You don't have to convert, you just say, I want the Jewish treatment.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because I think the funeral industry is struggling, and there's a lot of funeral professionals that don't really know what's involved, and they haven't done very many of them, and so they may be nervous.
Right.
And I think that's why it's so important to be clear about your wishes and to ask for it, because if you don't ask, they don't know. And it's, they do a lot of funerals, and so they know. In mortuary school, they learn certain things, and as the industry changes and as the consumer changes, they're a little bit on their back foot trying to keep up with that.
Sure.
And so, if you think about New Mexico, like there's one green cemetery in the whole state, right?
Is the bottom line money,
No, I don't think so.
that it cuts into money, profit for traditional?
I think that people want to spend their money differently than they did 25 years ago. So, for example, they may not want to spend $5,000 on a copper casket. Historically, in the funeral business, a lot of the revenue came from the merchandise, right? Depending on what casket you bought. Today, I think most of it is around the service that you're provided. Obviously there's a cost to have a building, to keep lights on, to pay staff, to pay vehicle expenses. So there are costs, and you can have a less expensive funeral or you can have a very expensive funeral. And it's really going to depend on what you want to do. So I'll give you some examples. So I've heard from a lot of people where they're not actually spending that much money on the funeral itself, but they're spending a lot of money on the celebration. So people may,
Drink costs money.
yeah. So I mean, like I know there was, I mentioned we had a location in New Jersey, and I was talking to a funeral director in New Jersey, and they were doing a funeral for someone of REI. REI is the outdoor company, and this person wanted a green burial, and there was this new green cemetery that had opened up, and I think the person was buried in one of our caskets, which are not very expensive relative to other caskets, but they put up a marquee, they brought in portable toilets, they catered it, so the burial and the funeral itself wasn't that expensive, the merchandise wasn't that expensive, but creating an event to honor and celebrate this person and having that was probably much more expensive. That was probably $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. So that's what, people are choosing to spend their money in different ways to honor a loved one. It's not about, it feels to me, and I think data verifies this, that people are less concerned about the deceased body. Yes, we want to be respectful and pay respect to the dead, but it's really about celebrating who they were, coming together as a family to heal and to grieve, versus, let's make sure they have shoes in their casket, or make sure when we have the memorial service, the cremated remains are actually in the urn. This weird kind of smoke and mirror type stuff where, the industry still thinks certain things are important, but the consumer wants other things. And so there's this disconnect between what the industry knows how to provide and what the consumer now wants. And I think the industry is struggling and trying to catch up with those demands.
A notoriously slow to change
Super
industry.
slow to change.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think these types of events and consumers being educated and asking informed questions helps everyone. Yeah.
So you said that there's some funeral homes that do this, but what about cemeteries? They don't all allow green funerals?
No, so for example, a lot of cemeteries will require a vault. You know, vault's technically not green. The idea of a vault is it protects the casket, which protects the body. It also prevents collapse. I mean, if you think about a cemetery, a lot of times graves are dug with heavy equipment, and if you're driving over other graves, it's going to collapse those graves. But there are other techniques that you can have a burial without a vault. And so, for example, that cemetery that I mentioned in Portland, you know, when you have a casket like this or a shrouded body, you know, that casket's probably going to collapse under the weight. And so, you know, there's really no concern about those graves collapsing. But I think the industry is very nervous about that. And so, even though there's no law around vaults, a lot of cemeteries might require them. I think what they're starting to see now, with your question about money, is that, you know, people have moved away from traditional burial, but there is an interest in green burial. And if cemeteries allow people to have a green burial, i.e. without a vault, then they're going to be selling real estate, as it were. You know, they're going to be selling that lot. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sold anything if the family had cremated, right? Because you only need a small section or they're going to scatter. So, yes.
Yesterday they talked about a new way to be planted under a tree with your ashes. Will you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I guess there's a lot of interest around that. People like the idea of life
Being a
after
tree.
death and being a tree. Yeah. So, I mean, there's several ways you can do it. I mean, all of our products, for example, most of our products are biodegradable. So you could dig a hole, put a biodegradable urn in there, and plant a tree, right? But we also have products kind of like this one, where you can put the cremated remains in the bottom and plant a tree above and actually watch the tree grow in the urn. So this is made of like a renewable cornstarch material. This is Portuguese cork. It has holes in it, and inside here there's it looks like a hockey puck. It's like compressed organic material, and when you add water to the top, that hockey puck expands to become the soil that you plant a seed or a tree in. And you could literally have it on your dining room table. The nice thing about that is that, if you're not ready to let go, you can actually have this on your dining room table, kitchen table. When the urn starts to crack, which it will as the tree grows, then you would plant it in a pot or plant it outside.
So you plant the whole thing? Or
You plant the whole thing and the whole thing biodegrades. Yeah.
That's really neat.
That's very
Mhm.
cool.
Yeah. So this is a whole system. Cremated remains have a relatively high pH, so they're not very good for growing. You couldn't grow anything in cremated remains because it's like inert, but it might actually kill the tree. And so this cork disc, this cork divider in the middle, has holes in it. So as you water the plant, minerals and nutrients filter over the cremated remains, lowering the pH. And so we've basically created a system. There are other products on the market similar to this, but they tend to be paper, and you have to mix wood chips and some different stuff. And as soon as you do that, you have to plant it in the ground, because the product will fall apart because it's paper. Whereas this is rigid enough to actually keep in your home for several weeks or months. So a lot of people like that idea. I don't think it's possible at the moment with a full body. I know most people have seen, I think it's called Capsula Mundi. It's an Italian company that has this huge cocoon. I don't think it's commercially available. I'm not sure if it's commercially viable, just in terms of practicalities. How do you handle a giant cocoon, But I think you're right. People really love the idea of life after death and becoming a tree.
You
And
have
there's
to be
different
careful
ways to-
here in New Mexico because of the lack of rain.
Right.
If you plant it.
That's exactly
If you planted it someplace that you weren't able
Right.
to water it all the time.
Right,
Then you die all over again.
right.
Portland would be great, I think.
Right.
Portland would be great.
Well, and we appreciate you hosting us here today. This is
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Kudos.
Thank you.